Regarding Men, Episode 35, Kill Men to Stop Patriarchy.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Regarding Men. Yes, Regarding Men, and today we're going to talk about an article. But before we do, Paul Elam's here today,
Hey,
as is Janice B. Mingo, both of whom are wonderful human beings and experts in men's issues. And today we're going to talk about a really specific men's issue. It's an article by by Mona Eltahui, I think is the way you pronounce it, and I'm just going to say Mona from now on. But there was an article, and check this out. Here's the title of the article. I want patriarchy to fear women. Mona Eltahui says the time for being civil, peaceful, and polite is over. And she goes on. It's worse than that. She's advocating violence of women against men because of this octopus she sees of patriarchy, where the arms of patriarchy are all these things like misogyny and homophobia, and all these arms are grabbing women. And the women need to fight back, Paul and Janice. They need to fight back and hit each other. You know, they hit men. They need to be violent against men. This is crazy stuff. I mean, just imagine for a second that anything having to do with men, they said, well, he just needs to hit her. You know, that'll solve that problem. He just needs to hit her. I mean, domestic violence, it used to be, long ago, they'd say any violence is bad. And then it sort of shifted. And it's only men's violence is bad. Women are just protecting themselves. Mm-hmm. So it's the same kind of crap we see here. It's like justification for women to be violent is what I see as the basis to this article, which is crazy feminist crap. What do you guys think about this?
I gotta say, this is where feminist ideology was destined to end up.
Yeah.
It was always going to end up here, folks. And guess what? This is not the worst of it, because within a few years, you'll see articles not about hitting men, but about shooting them and cutting them. This is where this hateful ideology ends up. And Mona, what's her name? I'll just call her Big Red 2. Stick her picture up there. She looks just like Big Red of Canadian fame with the fire engine red straight out of a 49-cent bottle of hair dye. But she's got a working model, like Tom said. It's the octopus, it's misogyny, it's white privilege, it's homophobia. I guess since she's of Egyptian origin, there's Islamophobia in there. That I guess that has to be part of the great patriarchal system.
Undoubtedly.
And we should react violently to this. We should make men, she's not wanting patriarchy to fear women. She's wanting men to fear women. And guess what, Mona? They already do.
Yeah, really.
This is why that you see men playing by Mike Pence rules, and why you're seeing articles on Wall Street where companies are just like not hiring women in order to avoid problems. They're already afraid. And they're afraid of the proxy violence that is committed on behalf of women, and the proxy aggression from HR departments, from academics, from all sort of areas of life. We're already afraid. And she, I think, is feeding off of that fear. She likes it. She wants to be feared. I think it makes her feel powerful to be feared. And this is one of the things that I've got to say to feminists, that the fundamental core problem here, feminists always are great to say, when a man is strong, he's viewed as a leader. But when a woman is strong, she's viewed as a bitch. And I'm saying that this woman, Mona, is the example, the perfect example, that no, the problem is that you don't understand the difference between being a bitch and being strong. You're sitting here bragging about initiating physical violence and wanting people to fear you. That's not what leaders do. That's not what strong people do. They lead. They inspire others to want to follow. They don't try to make the world crawl at their feet. And this is just sickness. It's pure sickness. An absolutely arrogant, narcissistic bully trying to brag about being a bully and saying she's being a bully for the betterment of women.
Mhm.
Give
Yes.
me a fucking break. This is bullshit.
Yeah, and given a very respectful hearing in the CBC, Canada's national broadcaster, never a bit of doubt. I mean, you know, it's absolutely unimaginable that you know, a man advocating anything anywhere near this would be interviewed at all on the CBC, the left-leaning feminist CBC. And certainly would receive absolutely no pushback and all these respectful questions. It's amazing. And I mean, the thing that struck me, she says here, you know, the most outrageous thing she said, perhaps, although everything is outrageous when she talks about women, you know, urging women to be sinful, and how the time for, you know, the time for civility and politeness is over. I'm sorry, Mona, that time was over 50 years ago. Women haven't been civil and polite to men for 50 years. This is old stuff.
Amen.
And then she says, well, she asks people to imagine. And she says, now I'm using this word, imagine, and I'm underlining it 3 times. Oh, good for you. It's just imagining a scenario. Here's her imagined scenario. It's her fantasy. This is what she gets off on thinking about. A scenario in which we kill a certain number of men every week. How many men must we kill until patriarchy sits across the table from us? This army of righteous women, I guess, sits across the table from us and says, okay, stop. What must we do so that you can stop this culling? Well, I've got news for you, Mona. Your ignorance is really staggering, because the truth of the matter is that men are already being killed every week. This patriarchy that you talk about, that you imagine is a block of men who have organized to oppress women and to have a really great time while they do it, using women for their own pleasures and ends. This patriarchy exerts most of its violence on other men. The vast majority of male violence is violence against men. What kind of a patriarchy to oppress women is that results in more men being the victims of violence than women? She doesn't even seem to know that that is the case. So men are already being killed. Men are already being sacrificed. Men are already checking out themselves and killing themselves. Men are already being sacrificed in wars to protect women. It's a sort of weird patriarchy. It's not a very good system for subjugating women that ends up making more male victims. She has nothing to say about that. And I don't even think she's aware of that. She's that ignorant. She's that plugged into the feminist line. She also, of course, is not at all cognizant, it seems, of the fact that many women are violent too. I mean, maybe we're speaking to the converted here, but this seems totally absent from her worldview, from the worldview of the person interviewing her, and presumably from the many women that will buy her book, The 7 Necessary Sins for Women and Girls. They won't seem to realize that, yeah, women are already violent, especially in the private sphere. They make up more than they are the majority of the murderers of children already. They already are the majority of physical abusers of children. Does Mona ever think about the fact that some of these men who are violent were abused by abusive mothers when they were children? Because certainly there's a significant number. Women make up, equal numbers of those who abuse siblings, those who abuse elders. They are far from passive victims that she imagines them to be. I mean, she's just so silly. And the other thing is that this is old stuff. This is both, as you say, Paul, the end of feminism, in that it's the logical direction that all that hatred and that resentment and animosity was bound to go. It's also old. Valerie Solanas in 1968 wrote her book, The Scum Manifesto, scum being the Society for Cutting Up Men, in which she made the exact same kinds of arguments, that men are subhuman, that men need to be eliminated, that the world would be a far better place when most men are dead, or at least in subordinate positions, that men, feed off their own self-hatred and their awareness that they're not as good as women, that women are superior, and that men should be destroyed. And in that same year, she attempted to murder 3 men, Andy Warhol being one, and a couple of other men whose positions exact. One of them was Warhol's manager. The other was, I think, an art critic. She attempted to kill them. And for that, she was celebrated as a feminist heroine. The National Organization of Women got her a fancy lawyer. She was called a major figure for women's rights. She's always been a kind of folk hero amongst feminists. Her work has been reprinted by a boutique press with an admiring, gushing introduction by Avital Ronell, a professor at New York University. This is the way feminists, they've always glamorized fantasies about murdering men, and even actual murderers or attempted murderers of men. I'm trying to think of the serial killer that everybody said was acting in self-defense after she'd killed 7 Wuornos, Eileen Wuornos, another folk hero of feminists, killed 7 men. They said every one was in self-defense. Even though Wuornos herself admitted that wasn't the case, that she was killing out of rage. So this is both old and and it's shocking that it's now become so mainstream. In the case of Solanas, she was ultimately diagnosed with schizophrenia. Whether that was true or not, she only spent 3 years in prison, and much of it in psychiatric hospitals. Came out, started hassling and harassing Andy Warhol again. She essentially ruined his life. He was terrified for the rest of his life that she would come and finish the job that she started to do. And so that's the feminist heroine. She's taught in women's studies courses. This is the kind of woman that feminism has always adulated and admired. So, so this is just old hat that Mona Eltahawy is getting up to. And, maybe she too has a kind of some sort of personality disorder or mental illness that explains why she would write a book advocating violence and imagining that in any way is going to produce a better world. But I don't know what the CBC's excuse is, for giving her the space and for respectfully putting this forward as some kind of original, bold, provocative, serious kind of proposal for social change.
The fact that she's standing up, making these proclamations, being given a platform for it, is absolute proof that the world is nothing like the model she imagined.
Exactly. If men were anything like she describes, they'd find her body in a ditch. Exactly. She'd be dead.
Yeah.
But
she has platforms too. This is not someone who's unknown. She has written for The Guardian, Washington Post, International Herald Tribune, and the U.S. News and World Report. This is not a nobody. She's written, I think, 2 books. Yeah. It's like, no, this is, she's getting a platform. Any man doing the opposite sort of thing would be thrown into jail for just thinking it, Yeah.
Well, I'll give you an example. When I started advocacy, one of the things I predicated it on was that it was time for men to quit being polite. That we really did. Now, I was always anti-violence, and I stated that from the beginning, that I had no room in any advocacy for violence as a political expression. I think it's just absolutely unnecessary, wrong, and unproductive. But I did look at what happened to people like Warren Farrell, who were poo-pooed for years, and all the way going back to E. Belfort Bax, who were given this polite button-down discourse and making great points. And some people in the world said, oh, that's really nice. Now we'll move on and quit paying attention to you.
Right.
I thought men really had to stay up and throw away decorum a little bit in order to make a point. And I think I was right about that.
Yes.
But that was a true departure from the status quo for men's advocates. And it earned me the ire of a lot of men's advocates who didn't like what I was doing. And that was fine. But just like Janice said, this woman's not doing anything new. And she's doing it under the umbrella of protection that men provide. That's, I mean, this
Good
is
point too.
just absolutely ironic that she would not be able to get away with this at all and still have a platform were it not for men protecting her and enabling her.
And let her give it a shot in the Middle East to see how far she gets.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, talk that stuff in Egypt.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
she knows that.
Yeah, she knows that. She'd much rather stay here where she has, well, she's in New York City, I think.
Wants.
She can say whatever she wants. I mean, the cognitive dissonance is just striking again. I mean, we just had a discussion about that panel, Are Men Obsolete? You know, be it resolved that they are. So how can, at the one hand, you have 4 women on a panel talking about whether men are obsolete or not, and most agreeing that, yeah, they probably are, and laughing about it and having a great time discussing all the ways that men are failing and women are surging ahead. And at the same time, you have this woman talking about, you know, the patriarchy and how horrible it is and how, you know, we have to, which is it? You know,
it's the cloak of gynocentrism.
It's whatever rationale I need at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And gynocentrism protects them both.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know, they can say whatever they want, and men can't say diddly.
Yeah, and we know that next, she's going to be claiming that she's received all sorts of death threats and all sorts of horrible rape threats, and that this just proves she'll never have any evidence of those. But you know, this just proves that we do live in such a horrible, horrible patriarchy, and that any woman who speaks out is immediately silenced. And you know,
Oh boy.
Yeah, I've noticed how silenced women are these days.
Yeah, really.
Or they just can't say anything.
It's the men who are silenced who can't say a damn thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, here's what she says. My question here is, how long must we wait so that men stop raping us? What will it take so that men stop murdering us? Huh?
Yeah. You know, just nonsense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, how long will it take until people stop stealing cars? It must be because we encourage them to do it. It must be because we glamorize the theft of cars, because we live in a car theft culture. I mean, it's just,
there you go.
It's just such
and it's
nonsense.
men's fault.
Mm-hmm. And I'd also like to know, I'd love to know, you know, what kind of gender equality she advocates if she's talking about justifiable violence against only abusive men. I mean, it's not clear from her scenario which men are going to be killed and, you know, what exactly she means by all of these.
Will do.
So what about the woman who gropes a man? She claims that she beat a man in a Montreal bar who groped her, and she beat him up. For one thing, I absolutely, bring me the proof, show me the picture of this beaten man.
Pants on fire.
Yeah, this is nonsense.
Disabled.
She did not. She's just making stuff up.
He was in a wheelchair behind her.
Yeah, probably. That's about it. You know, I mean, come on. Let's acknowledge reality. Women cannot beat up men. They don't. You know, the vast majority are not.
But the movies say they can, Janice. TV says they can.
Yeah. Well, it's a very dangerous thing to advocate, because one man is going to defend himself, and then that's not going to go well for the woman. But I'd like to know, what about women who grope men? I've spoken to many men who have been groped in the workplace, in bars. You know, are they allowed to haul off and hit the woman who gropes them?
It's only fair.
Only fair if that's what you're going to start. Yeah, if that's what you're going to start advocating.
All she did was touch you, and you hit her.
This is such nonsense through and through.
Yep.
Anyway,
you know, it's funny. I think most men in their lives, or a lot anyway, have been the recipient of unwanted touching from a woman. At one point or another in their lives, it's happened. But it just doesn't occur to men to go into violent retribution or something like that. It's like, hey, you know, lady, either, hey, that's fine, I'm interested, or no, I'm not interested. Mm-hmm. Keep your hands off of me. But it's not like, oh man, I need to stomp this person into the mud because of an inappropriate touch.
And I'm traumatized.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I have to have therapy, and I have to speak about it in the House of Commons and weep and have everybody applaud me for being a survivor of sexual assault. You know,
and talk about how brave I am.
Mm-hmm. How incredibly
for coming forward.
brave I am. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, well.
Yeah. So, so I think definitely Mona El Tahui, we definitely give you our Puta prize. She might be the best.
She is the
really,
Puta
I think
prize.
she deserves Puta of the year. She's
God,
really,
Wow, I
really?
didn't know
you
we were
know,
going to have a Puta of the year, but I tell you what, if anybody qualifies since, let's say, Valerie Solanas, it would be uh, El, what's her name again?
El Tahawi.
Elvis?
El Tohui.
Oh, El Tahui. Yes, man, don't get me started on that name. Anyway, she definitely deserves
Yeah.
the flying Puta.
She really does.
And I will say quite honestly, I hope she doesn't buy her own bullshit because she could end up really getting hurt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I still, as much as I despise people like this, don't want to see that happen.
Yeah.
But if she buys her own craziness and starts attacking men physically, one of these days she'll go after the wrong one.
Mm-hmm.
And that'll be it for her.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that would be perhaps just, but sad just the same.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, a society, the kind of society that she seems to imagine and to want to actually bring into being would be, well, I mean, it would be very, very, very dangerous society for women, and it would be horrific beyond imagining. And you know, she must be delusional that she seems to think it could produce something good. So yeah, I hope that she doesn't actually enact any of her fantasies too.
Yeah, really.
Either she's delusional or she's playing to the violence against men fantasy that is so common today running through social groups. It
Yeah.
is.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was another thing I was going to say about her idea that, you know, this fantasy that let's sacrifices or murder a certain number of men per week until patriarchy comes to the table. It's not going to make a hill of beans difference. Whenever they show those videos where a man is being abused in a public space versus when a woman is being abused in a public space, nobody cares about the man. Patriarchy, if that's what we live under, doesn't give a damn. Men can be abused, men can be murdered. Society happily chugs along. It's when the women are being abused that people spring to their defense.
Yes.
So when they get a hangnail.
So I don't think she really imagines that. I agree with you, Paul. This is just part of a fantasy. This is the logical outcome of this incredibly stoked, socially respectable, continually, you know, ramped up hatred of men and fantasy of violence against men.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed. So there's no humanitarian award today?
Well, I wouldn't think so. In a world where, you know, Mona the Puta has found herself multiple platforms and the lauding of her peers and accolades from media, nobody's risen to a humanitarian award in the midst of all that.
Paul, I have one suggestion.
Okay.
The commenters in her article.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One guy said,
good.
When countries make statements like this to each other, they're considered as declarations of war.
Mm-hmm.
Another guy said, I have a phobia against hate-filled toxic people who are immersed in forming tribal-based identity groupings from a smug, elitist, judgmental pulpit. Yeah.
Well said.
Johnny, we have a winner.
I think those two guys, man, and you better believe they're probably men, but those two guys, let's put them up as humanitarians.
Okay,
Absolutely.
Because if you read the comments of this article, you'll see almost everyone is going, bullshit, bullshit. Good. But everyone, feminists are applauding you.
But you know something? Men are going bullshit, so nobody cares.
Exactly. Exactly, Paul. You got it.
Oh,
you got it. Are we finished?
Yes, and so. We care. That's why we make the big bucks.
Because we hold men in high regard.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and men
are
good.
Indeed, they are. Good. So we'll see you guys next week. All right. You take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.